Modern democracy, once heralded as the pinnacle of political evolution, has revealed itself to be little more than a sophisticated mechanism for the systematic extraction of resources from the productive elements of society. What began as a noble experiment in representative government has degenerated into an elaborate system of legalized plunder, where the politically organized masses vote themselves benefits extracted from the economically productive minority. This perverse inversion of justice has created a civilization where excellence is punished, mediocrity is rewarded, and the natural relationship between effort and reward has been severed at the institutional level. The consequences of this systemic dysfunction are visible everywhere, from crumbling infrastructure to cultural decay, from economic stagnation to the collapse of social trust. This video will meticulously document how contemporary democratic structures have become engines of wealth redistribution that incentivize dependency while discouraging merit, ultimately setting the stage for civilizational decline. The French political philosopher Alexis de Tocqueville's prescient warning about the tyranny of the majority has materialized in its most destructive form. Through the democratic process, the 51% now routinely votes to expropriate the wealth and productivity of the 10% who create disproportionate value in society. This isn't governance in any meaningful sense, it's legalized mob rule where the strong are shackled and forced to carry the weak. The voting booth has become a weapon of mass confiscation, with electoral majorities systematically dismantling property rights and personal freedoms in their insatiable hunger for unearned benefits. What makes this tyranny particularly insidious is that it wears the mask of legitimacy, having been sanctified through the very democratic processes it abuses. The result is a society where political power, rather than productive capacity, determines resource allocation, a surefire recipe for economic stagnation and social decay. Progressive taxation systems provide the clearest example of this institutionalized theft masquerading as social policy. In the United States, the top 1% of earners now shoulder nearly 40% of all federal income taxes, while the bottom 50% contribute a mere 3%, a disparity that grows more extreme with each passing year. This isn't fairness by any objective standard. It's the politically powerful exploiting the economically productive through state-sanctioned confiscation. The rhetoric of paying your fair share has been weaponized to justify ever more aggressive wealth transfers, with no consideration given to the destructive consequences of punishing success. The perverse reality is that modern tax systems have been carefully designed to create the illusion of consent while operating as sophisticated extraction mechanisms. When nearly half the population pays no income tax at all while voting for increased benefits, democracy degenerates into little more than a protection racket for the unproductive. Social welfare programs, originally conceived as temporary safety nets, have metastasized into a self-perpetuating industry that creates and maintains a permanent underclass. In the United States alone, welfare spending has grown by an inflation-adjusted 300% since 1970, not to lift people out of poverty, but to keep them securely tethered to government patronage. The design of these programs systematically discourages personal responsibility while encouraging dependency, with benefit cliffs that punish attempts at self-sufficiency. Entire generations have now been raised in systems where marriage is financially penalized, work is disincentivized, and personal initiative is actively discouraged. The welfare state hasn't alleviated poverty, it has institutionalized it, creating a vast constituency of government dependents who reliably vote for politicians promising ever greater handouts. This isn't compassion, it's the calculated cultivation of human livestock for political purposes. Cultural narratives in modern democratic societies have undergone a disturbing inversion, where wealth creators are framed as villains while those who contribute little to society are celebrated as victims deserving of endless entitlements. The language of social justice has been weaponized to justify the wholesale confiscation of private property, with terms like privilege and fair share serving as moral cover for legalized theft. Meanwhile, the productive members of society, the innovators, entrepreneurs and high performers who drive economic progress, are subjected to relentless character assassination and punitive taxation. This moral perversion has created a society where failure is rewarded and achievement is punished, where the incompetent demand redistribution as a right while the competent are vilified for their success. The long-term consequences of this value inversion are catastrophic, as it systematically dismantles the very incentives that make societal progress possible. Modern democracies have perfected the art of financing redistribution through unsustainable debt accumulation, with the United States now staggering under $34 trillion in national debt. This insidious system allows current voters to enjoy immediate benefits while burdening future generations with the bill. Intergenerational theft on a scale that would make medieval warlords blush. The political class has discovered that they can buy votes today by mortgaging tomorrow, creating a Ponzi scheme of government spending that can only end in economic collapse. Central banks enable this theft through monetary inflation, silently eroding the purchasing power of savers to fund democratic spending sprees. The result is a form of financial slavery where productive citizens work increasingly longer hours to maintain their standard of living, while shouldering the debts of the irresponsible. This isn't fiscal policy, it's generational warfare waged through balance sheets and inflation metrics. Government employees have become a privileged aristocracy in modern democratic societies, enjoying salaries and benefits packages that dwarf those available in the productive private sector. In the United States, federal workers earn on average 50% more than their private sector counterparts for less demanding work and near total job security. This bloated administrative layer exists primarily to perpetuate itself and expand its reach, creating ever more Byzantine regulations that justify its continued existence. The bureaucratic class has become a self-sustaining parasite on the productive economy, extracting wealth through taxation while contributing little of tangible value. Worse still, these bureaucrats increasingly see themselves as a ruling class, rather than public servants using their positions to impose ideological agendas on the population they're supposed to serve. The result is a system where those who produce are governed by those who consume, where makers are ruled by takers. Public education systems in democratic nations have transformed from institutions of learning into indoctrination centers for dependency. Teachers' unions, among the most powerful political forces in modern democracies, push ideologies that actively undermine meritocracy while demanding ever-increasing compensation for declining educational outcomes. The curriculum increasingly emphasizes social engineering over academic rigor, producing graduates who are fluent in grievance narratives but incapable of critical thinking or basic mathematics. This isn't accidental, it's by design. An educated, independent populace might question the redistributionist premises of modern democracy, while an ignorant, dependent one will reliably vote for more government benefits. The education system has become a taxpayer-funded factory, producing obedient dependents rather than self-sufficient citizens, ensuring the continued expansion of the welfare state. Socialized medicine systems represent one of the most effective wealth extraction mechanisms ever devised by democratic governments. By forcing the young and healthy to subsidize the healthcare costs of the old and unhealthy, these systems create moral hazard on a societal scale. Personal responsibility evaporates when someone else is footing the bill, leading to explosive growth in preventable lifestyle diseases and pharmaceutical dependency. In the United States, the Affordable Care Act deliberately destabilized the private insurance market to push the country towards single-payer healthcare, not because it's more efficient, all evidence shows the opposite, but because it gives government control over 1/6 of the economy. The healthcare industry has become a protected cartel, with costs artificially inflated through regulation and rent-seeking. all while politicians pose as saviors of the very system they ruined. This isn't healthcare policy, it's wealth redistribution disguised as medicine. Public sector unions have become perhaps the most destructive force in modern democracies, holding entire cities and states hostage to their unsustainable demands. The template is always the same. Unions bankroll political candidates who then approve exorbitant compensation packages, including pension benefits that mathematically cannot be fulfilled. When the bill comes due, these same politicians declare bankruptcy or raise taxes rather than confront their union benefactors. Detroit and Chicago provide textbook examples of this dynamic, where union-dominated governments promised benefits they couldn't afford, leading to municipal collapse. The teachers' unions may be the most pernicious example, routinely striking for higher pay while educational outcomes plummet, holding children's futures hostage to their demands. This isn't collective bargaining. It's legalized extortion enabled by democratic politicians dependent on union support. Identity politics has spawned an entire industry dedicated to professional victimhood, where grievance groups compete for government favors and corporate handouts. The language of social justice has been weaponized to justify the wholesale transfer of wealth from productive sectors of society to professional activists and their constituencies. Universities now maintain entire departments dedicated to manufacturing victim narratives, while corporations fall over themselves to demonstrate allyship through monetary donations and preferential hiring. This grievance industrial complex has become self-perpetuating, constantly identifying new forms of oppression to justify its continued existence and expansion. The result is a society where actual achievement matters less than perceived victim status, where the productive are guilted into subsidizing the resentful. This isn't social progress, it's the monetization of victimhood and the institutionalization of resentment as political currency. Small businesses and entrepreneurs face an ever-growing mountain of bureaucratic regulations that serve as hidden taxes on productivity. In the United States, the Federal Register now contains over 180,000 pages of regulations, with thousands more added each year. These rules disproportionately burden small businesses while often benefiting large corporations who can afford compliance departments and lobbyists to shape regulations in their favor. The regulatory state has become a jobs program for lawyers and compliance officers, creating entire industries that produce nothing of value while extracting wealth from those who do. This isn't responsible governance. It's institutionalized rent-seeking that stifles innovation and protects established players from competition. The cumulative effect is an economy where compliance matters more than competence, where navigating bureaucracy is more valuable than creating products or services. Central banking represents one of the most sophisticated wealth extraction mechanisms ever devised, allowing governments to silently confiscate wealth through currency devaluation. When democratic governments spend beyond their means, which is always, central banks monetize the debt by creating new money out of thin air. This inflation acts as a hidden tax on savers and wage earners, eroding purchasing power while benefiting debtors and financial institutions. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet has exploded from $900 billion in 2008 to over $8 trillion today, a monetary inflation that has fueled asset bubbles while destroying middle-class savings. This isn't monetary policy, it's legalized counterfeiting that enables democratic governments to spend without visibly raising taxes. The strong, who built savings through discipline and delayed gratification, see their wealth systematically eroded to fund democratic spending sprees. Social security systems in democratic nations operate as textbook Ponzi schemes, taking from young workers to pay older retirees with no actual savings or investment behind the promises. In the United States, the Social Security Trust Fund will be exhausted by 2033, leaving future workers to shoulder an impossible burden for benefits they'll never receive themselves. This intergenerational transfer represents one of the largest wealth extractions in history, with millennials and Gen Z expected to pay for boomer retirements while facing their own retirement insecurity. The program was originally sold as insurance, but has become an entitlement that consumes nearly a quarter of the federal budget. This isn't retirement security, it's demographic warfare waged by the old against the young, enabled by democratic politicians who refuse to reform the system for fear of losing votes. Crony capitalism has become the unspoken economic system of modern democracies, where politically connected corporations receive billions in subsidies, tax breaks, and government favors. Companies like Tesla, Amazon, and countless defense contractors have mastered the art of extracting wealth from taxpayers while posing as free market success stories. The renewable energy sector may be the most egregious example, with companies surviving entirely on government mandates and subsidies rather than actual market demand. This isn't capitalism, it's corporate welfare that distorts markets and punishes truly innovative companies that refuse to play the political game. The system has become so corrupt that corporate lobbying budgets now exceed research and development spending at many major firms, proving that political connections matter more than product quality in modern democratic economies. America's lawsuit culture has created a parallel wealth extraction system where the unproductive can legally loot the productive through frivolous claims. Tort costs in the United States exceed $400 billion annually, a massive hidden tax on innovation and productivity. The plaintiff's bar has become expert at finding deep pockets to target, whether through class action shakedowns or dubious personal injury claims. Pharmaceutical companies pay billions in settlements not because their products are unsafe, but because it's cheaper than fighting endless lawsuits. This litigation industrial complex creates perverse incentives throughout the economy, from doctors practicing defensive medicine to companies avoiding beneficial but legally risky innovations. The system doesn't deliver justice, it delivers wealth transfers from productive sectors to trial lawyers and professional plaintiffs. Government-backed student loans have enabled universities to raise tuition by 1,400% since 1978 while pushing increasingly worthless degrees. This higher education bubble represents one of the most effective wealth extraction schemes in history, transferring billions from young people to academic institutions that provide little economic value in return. Universities have become hedge funds with classrooms, amassing enormous endowments while producing graduates burdened with debt and unmarketable skills. The student loan system can't be discharged in bankruptcy, making it perfect for wealth extraction. Young people are legally obligated to pay for degrees that often don't lead to sufficient income to repay the loans. This isn't education policy, it's indentured servitude for the 21st century, with universities as the new plantation owners. The renewable energy push has become a multi-billion-dollar wealth transfer scheme disguised as environmentalism. Through subsidies, mandates, and tax credits, governments force productive sectors of the economy to fund unreliable energy sources that can't survive in free markets. The result has been skyrocketing energy costs for manufacturers and households, with the poor disproportionately affected by rising utility bills. The green energy industry survives entirely on political favoritism rather than actual efficiency or reliability, with well-connected investors reaping windfall profits from government-mandated markets. This isn't environmental stewardship, it's crony capitalism wrapped in virtuous rhetoric, another mechanism for extracting wealth from productive sectors and redistributing it to political favorites. Democratic politicians actively encourage mass migration not out of humanitarian concern, but to create new dependent voting blocs. Uncontrolled immigration floods labor markets, suppressing wages for native workers while overwhelming public services and infrastructure. The resulting social tensions then justify expanded government programs and bureaucracies, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of dependency and control. Meanwhile, corporate interests benefit from cheap labor while passing the social costs on to taxpayers. This isn't immigration policy, it's demographic engineering designed to create permanent democratic majorities dependent on government patronage, with the added benefit of depressing wages for the working class. Unfunded public pension liabilities exceed $6 trillion in the United States alone, representing promises made by politicians to government workers that future taxpayers will be forced to honor. These pension systems assume unrealistic rates of return, while benefits grow automatically through cost of living adjustments. The math simply doesn't work, but politicians keep making promises they can't keep to buy union support. When the bill comes due, it won't be the politicians or union bosses who suffer. It will be taxpayers and public services that face brutal cuts. This isn't retirement security, it's intergenerational theft, enabled by democratic politicians thinking only of the next election cycle. While democratic systems systematically extract wealth from productive citizens, the masses are pacified with an endless stream of entertainment and distraction. Netflix, video games, social media, and professional sports serve as modern bread and circuses, preventing serious opposition to the extraction regime. The average person now spends over 5 hours daily consuming digital entertainment, time that might otherwise be spent understanding and resisting the systems looting their future. This isn't accidental. A distracted populace doesn't revolt when their wealth is confiscated or their freedoms eroded. The entertainment industry has become an essential pillar of the democratic extraction system, keeping the exploited too numb to notice their exploitation. Government intervention in housing markets has created artificial scarcity while driving prices beyond the reach of young families. Zoning laws, affordable housing mandates, and easy credit policies have combined to create a system where home ownership is increasingly reserved for the wealthy or those who bought decades ago. The Federal Reserve's monetary policies have inflated asset bubbles that benefit existing owners while pricing out new entrants. This isn't housing policy. It's generational wealth transfer on a massive scale, with young people forced to spend ever larger portions of their income on basic shelter, while older homeowners see their equity skyrocket through no effort of their own. The military-industrial complex thrives under democratic systems, with defense contractors lobbying for endless conflicts and weapons systems. Young men, disproportionately from lower-income backgrounds, are sacrificed in these wars while arms dealers and contractors reap obscene profits. The Pentagon budget now exceeds $800 billion annually, with much of it wasted on overpriced equipment and failed projects. This isn't national defense, it's a wealth extraction scheme where taxpayer dollars flow to politically connected corporations under the guise of security. The human cost is staggering, but the democratic system ensures there's always another generation to send to war and another budget to approve. The FDA's drug approval process has been captured by the pharmaceutical industry it's supposed to regulate, creating a system where new treatments take years and billions to approve, while generics face endless regulatory hurdles. The result is artificially high drug prices that force patients and insurers to pay exorbitant costs for essential medicines. This isn't healthcare, it's rent-seeking of the worst kind, where government-granted monopolies allow companies to charge whatever the market will bear for life-saving treatments. The opioid crisis revealed how deeply corrupt the system has become, with regulators turning a blind eye to dangerous practices as long as the political donations kept flowing. too big to fail. Financial institutions take reckless risks knowing taxpayers will bail them out when things go wrong. The 2008 financial crisis demonstrated this dynamic perfectly. Banks made trillions in bad bets, were rescued with public money, and then paid out record bonuses the following year. This privatized, gains, socialized losses model represents the ultimate democratic scam, where financial elites capture the regulatory system to ensure they never face the consequences of their actions. The Federal Reserve's constant market interventions have turned Wall Street into a casino with taxpayer-funded guarantees, encouraging ever riskier behavior while punishing responsible savers with near-zero interest rates. Corporate media outlets have become de facto propaganda arms for the democratic extraction system, pushing narratives that justify ever greater wealth redistribution and government control. Facts are routinely twisted or ignored to maintain the fiction that current policies are sustainable and beneficial. Negative consequences of democratic excesses are downplayed or blamed on convenient scapegoats, capitalism, racism, climate change, rather than the real culprit, the democratic system itself. This isn't journalism. It's ideological manufacturing of consent for policies that benefit elites at the expense of the productive classes. Tax-exempt organizations have become sophisticated wealth redistribution channels, pushing political agendas while their executives earn six-figure salaries. Foundations and NGOs operate as extensions of government power, implementing policies that would be unpopular if enacted directly through legislation. The environmental movement may be the most egregious example, with billionaire-funded non-profits lobbying for policies that devastate working-class communities while exempting their donors from the consequences. This isn't philanthropy, it's political activism disguised as charity, another mechanism for bypassing democratic processes to impose elite preferences on the population. Easy credit policies have encouraged the financially irresponsible to live beyond their means while banks profit from interest payments and fees. Credit card companies deliberately target those least able to manage debt, knowing government policies will prevent any meaningful reform. Student loans, payday lending, and subprime auto loans all follow the same pattern. Lure the weak into debt slavery, then collect interest in perpetuity. This isn't financial inclusion, it's predatory extraction, disguised as access to credit, with democratic governments complicit in the scam. Congressional representatives have seen their net worth increase by an average of 200% while in office, not through their government salaries, but through insider trading, lobbyist connections, and sweetheart deals. The stock portfolios of politicians routinely outperform the market by suspicious margins, proving they use their positions for personal enrichment. This isn't public service, it's legalized corruption enabled by democratic systems that lack meaningful accountability. The political class has become a self-perpetuating aristocracy that grows wealthy while presiding over national decline. Modern democracy hasn't created equality or justice. It has institutionalized parasitism on a civilizational scale. The strong are systematically milked to feed the weak, the productive are punished to subsidize the unproductive, and future generations are burdened with debts they never agreed to incur. This system can't continue indefinitely. Either we restore meritocratic principles and constitutional limits on government power, or we face civilizational collapse when the productive finally refuse to carry the load. The choice is stark. Either we dismantle the extraction mechanisms of modern democracy, or we continue down the road to serfdom until the entire system implodes under its own contradictions. The time for reform is running out.